Hello and welcome to No Strings Attached. In this video I'd like to just give you a sense of why I've decided to make this channel and to let you know what some of my goals are with it. And a lot of this can be traced back to a time in my life when I began to question a lot of the things which I thought were true. Like most people, I grew up with a number of ideas and beliefs about the world and how it works. However, towards the end of my time in college, I became very skeptical of nearly everything. And going through this process taught me a number of different things, but one I think is especially important for understanding why I decided to make this channel. And it has to do with the way in which controversial topics are discussed. Whether it be, religion, science, politics, even ethics. I noticed in my research that the way in which controversial issues are discussed tends to occur in, to put it mildly, a suboptimal manner. A number of examples of this can be given. I know one that stood out to me was how prevalent misunderstandings were. There are times when I'd be listening to debates and it seems as if people were just talking past one another and they spent more time criticizing what they thought their opponents believed rather than what their opponents actually believed. There were other instances where I noticed people would debunk the weaker arguments that their opponents would make, but they never took the time to, fully engage with the strongest claims that their opponents made against their own position. And unfortunately, I think that this could create a situation where people could become overconfident in the strength of their own position simply because they haven't adequately tested it against the best claims which can be made against it. Another problem that I encountered had to do with the information sources that I would read or listen to. And this had to do simply with the selective nature of them. I noticed that, you go to one source and some facts might be cited to produce one conclusion, and then you go to another source and you'll notice that there tends to be a focus on different facts and a different conclusion might be arrived at. And it seemed hard to ignore that, there was sort of a selective, almost strategic reporting and omission of facts that was then used to produce a specific conclusion that might not otherwise be arrived at had one looked at all the information as a whole, or at least it wouldn't be quite as easy to arrive at that conclusion if you had looked at all of the information. I also sensed sort of, you could say, a personal problem or an individual, shortcoming perhaps. And this had to do with, just an unwillingness for people to be open to the possibility that they might be wrong. There are some people who, when I listened to them talk, it seemed as if they had already made up their minds about the issue. And for some people, it seemed as if even going into a research project or, going into a debate, they already had their minds fixed, they already had their minds made up. And unfortunately, it seems like this can blind us to opposing perspectives. It can blind us to evidence that doesn't fit with our beliefs or that contradicts our belief. And unfortunately, it can bias the way in which we conduct our research. I sense that at times people had a tendency to just look for information that confirmed their predetermined beliefs or their conclusions which they already held, rather than having their research determine or produce the conclusions that they arrive at. And a lot of this, I think, stems from a deeper, perhaps more fundamental problem, namely that it appears to me that truth seems to be taking the backseat to more superficial agendas. People can have all different, reasons for wanting to believe certain things. It could vary from personal interest to not wanting to admit that we're wrong. Whatever the reasons may be that bias us in one direction or another. It seems that I think at the heart of this flaw is that truth fails to hold that paramount position which it ought to have. And unfortunately, I think that this can contribute or even breed a very divisive, polarized setting, because if we're not all unified, at least fundamentally, on pursuing the truth, then it's going to be very difficult for us to sort through our differences, and I think that ultimately can allow our disagreements to persist. And I think that's part of the reason why disagreements persist. So those are just a handful of the issues that I've noticed as I've done my own research and examined different issues. And hopefully in this channel I'll be able to address some of these weaknesses as I see them. And a number of other goals that I have will hopefully contribute to the conversations that people are having about different social issues and different ethical and scientific issues. One goal that I have is to try and clean up the conversation. I know that when I listen to some talks, or especially to some debates, people can hop from issue to issue, and sometimes they'll go down irrelevant tangents, and the conversation can get very messy. And so hopefully I'll be able to do at least a decent job at presenting the information in a somewhat coherent and organized manner. I also want to try and do my best to give a fair hearing to different sides and different perspectives. I want to try and present them in their strongest form that's possible, and at the same time I also want to be critical of them and to do my best to point out whatever weaknesses I see in the different perspectives that I discuss. I also want to try and point out different assumptions that different perspectives bring to the table. I know that it can be easy to focus on the specifics of what's being discussed, and if there's a specific event that just happened that's being reported in the news, it can be easy to get caught up in what's happening right now. But I also think it's important for us to take the time to pause and step back and, peel back the more superficial layers and get down to the deeper beliefs and the deeper convictions that give rise to the specific views that we have on specific issues. And I think doing this will help us not only understand our own position, but also understand, some of the more core issues that cause us to differ from those who hold opposing perspectives. Another goal that I have is to try and show the complexity that is present in a number of different issues. I know that there have been times when I'll go and I'll research something, or I may watch a video, and the people who are presenting the information to me seem to convey the idea that the issue is very clear-cut, very simple, and that the answer is very obvious. And yet I've noticed that there have been times when I've gone and I've done my own research, and I've found that there are a number of variables that influence this specific issue, and that it's a lot more complicated than I was initially than I had initially thought, based upon the evidence that this particular outlet had given to me. So that's one thing I want to try to avoid. I want to try and avoid simple answers. And I don't want to do this. I don't want to say that their simple answers are always wrong. Sometimes the answer may be simple, but I think that there can be a tendency for people to gravitate towards the simple answers to the neglect of the reality of the situation, which may in fact be more complex than we realize. Another problem that I've noticed is, you could say, an unwillingness, or maybe just an unawareness of the uncertainty that we have about a specific issue. And I know that it can be easy to want answers, especially if there's a problem in society. It's easy to want to know, what can we do? What's the solution? And unfortunately, I think sometimes the best answer that we can give is that we don't know, and more research is needed. And I think that a lot of this just has to do with, being honest and to some extent humble about the limitations of what we know. And I don't think that pretending to know things which we don't actually know really contributes to bettering society, and it certainly won't help us identify problems and solve them. So I think that that's one issue that is important, that is to some extent neglected, and hopefully I'll be able to inject that into some of my videos. And then last but certainly not least, I hope to at least give people a sense of how I think and how different perspectives think as well. And this, I think, goes back to the whole idea of just trying to avoid misunderstandings. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to really probe the different perspectives and probe ourselves as well, and try and get a sense of what method we implement and what approach we implement as we arrive at the different conclusions which we arrive at. And doing this will hopefully allow us to not only understand ourselves and those who disagree with us better, but hopefully it will allow us to be able to level more precise criticisms of them and avoid, attacking, misconceptions about their beliefs, or perhaps level attacks against them personally. and focus on the arguments that they're making, and focus on the specific content of their beliefs and what they use to substantiate their beliefs. And I think that if this is done properly, it's the best way for us to filter through all the different ideas out there, and become unified and get a sense of what the best ideas are. And hopefully that will help us address the problems in society, and again, make the world, I guess you could say, a better place. And so that's pretty much it for this video. Those are some of the ideas that I've been rolling around in my head, some of the goals I have, some of the problems that I've seen, and hopefully I'll be able to contribute to the conversations around what I believe to be important issues, and hopefully I'll be able to do it in as honest and unbiased a manner as possible. So with that said, I think I'll wrap things up here. Thank you for watching, and hopefully whatever future content comes out on this channel will be helpful. Goodbye.